Good morning and welcome to the Whole Enchilada. I say good morning because it's morning for me. You may or may not be listening to this in the morning, but if it's not the morning, good day to you. Excited about the opportunity to launch the Whole Enchilada. The Whole Enchilada has been on my radar now for a couple years with the idea of the whole meaning behind the whole enchilada. And I know it's kind of a silly phrase, but the idea behind you can have it all. And how do we achieve that? So the whole goal of what we're going to be talking about in this podcast and the following episodes is this whole idea of how do we live life to its fullest in every aspect of our lives. Over time, I found through personal experience and watching other people is I feel like most people fall under one of two categories. I say most people, but realistically in these episodes, I'm going to be talking to those people that are really pushing the limits, those high achiever mentalities, those entrepreneurs, those hustlers that are out there making things happen. And I found that they kind of fall into two categories. One is they are succeeding at a very, very high level in one area of their lives, whether that be in their career, as an athlete, as a world traveler, whatever that looks like. They are succeeding at a very high level in one area of their lives, but every other aspect of their lives seems to become a servant to that one area that is thriving. So everything else is crashing and burning around them, and they find themselves in a trap of succeeding at such a high level that they have no choice but to let those things crash and burn around them. The other trap I see people falling into is almost on the other side of this, where they get so committed to this idea of work-life balance that in essence, they're not sticking with anything long enough to succeed at a high level, and thus they may be in balance, but they're balanced in mediocrity. They're a mediocre business person. They're a mediocre athlete. They're a mediocre husband. And so, and to be honest, I've been caught in both those traps in my career, where I get so overly committed to winning in one aspect that I don't even realize it. Without even it being perceived, other areas of my life may be suffering. And then when I recognize they're suffering, or I'm burning out in that one area that I'm putting so much time and energy, that I would get caught up in this idea again of, okay, work-life balance. I hear about this word, and one thing to keep in mind is this idea of work-life balance is younger than I am. It wasn't even coined a phrase until after I was even born. But the idea behind that is you get caught into it because just on a piece of paper, it sounds wonderful. Work-life balance sounds wonderful. But the way most of us approach it is we end up being balanced in mediocrity. The goal of the whole enchilada is to really get clarity. I am a believer. I am a believer that you can succeed and have a huge life in each area or aspect of your life. You don't need to neglect one to succeed in another. And on the other side of that coin is you don't need to accept mediocrity and just say, this is the way it is. Now, let me be clear. I've been caught in both those traps at different stages or seasons of my career. Let me be clear. This is not an episode or a podcast or a series where I'm telling you, look what I've done and let me tell you about it. It's more along the lines of, look what I'm attempting to do. And I'm inviting you to join me on that process. I'm not looking for a group of followers to see what I've done. I'm looking for a network of individuals that want to go on this journey with me. Because this is the one thing I am convinced of is this is not something where we say, oh, I achieved the whole enchilada. I achieved a perfect balance that I'm seeking. I've come to the conclusion, as I've really put my mind and brain around how to approach this journey, is there is no end to this journey. Through the rest of our lives, we're going to be learning how to have it all. And when I say have it all, you can't have everything, but you could have the things that are most important to you. And that is the journey we're going to go on together. If you go to thewholeenchilada.biz and look at our mission vision statement, it is the following: to build a network of individuals. That's you and me and anyone you want to invite along this journey with us. To build a network of individuals that fight the status quo, set and achieve big goals, think big and outside the box, that influence others for good, that are committed to giving back, that seek adventure, that aspire to greatness in business, personal relationships, and self-mastery, both physically and mentally. So as we jump into this, I thought it would be important for us to talk a little bit about and dive more into this idea of work-life balance today, as every episode beyond this is going to be focusing on different skill sets that we must acquire or pursue or refine along our journey. One of the most influential books that I've read across all my career, and specifically in regards to this idea, is the book The One Thing. It's one of the few books that I keep consistently on my desk or in my briefcase, and I refer back to it frequently. I thought I'd share a couple key points out of that book, because there in chapter 8, it talks about a balanced life. And it really talks about it in a way that I had never seen. This book came out in 2013. I'm going to share a personal experience of mine that actually happened in 2010, where I felt at the end of my rope. And that's where I really started my journey of seeking how do I operate at a very high level and still maintain those relationships and other aspects of my life that are important to me. And I'll share that example, but that story I'm going to share happened in 2010. This book didn't come out in 2013, and it kind of pulled those pieces together for me in this chapter. But it says that the truth is, balance is bunk. It is an unattainable pipe dream. The quest for balance between work and life, as we've come to think of it, isn't just a losing proposition. It's a hurtful and destructive one. That statement is completely different than the thousands of books and articles that have come out that says all you got to do is work on work-life balance. This is a completely opposite perspective on work-life balance. Not saying you shouldn't pursue it, but it's going to give us an idea of how to pursue it differently. The problem with living in the middle, balanced, would suggest that we're perfectly in the middle, not too far on one side or the other. But it says here, the problem with living in the middle is that it prevents you from making extraordinary time commitments to anything. In your effort to attend to all things, everything gets shortchanged and nothing gets its due. Think about anything that you've done, any accomplishment that you're proud of in your life. And I'm willing to bet, unless you're some freak of nature with a bunch of God-given natural talents, it took some extra effort and time and energy that you were willing to put into that someone else wasn't. Whether that was running a marathon or a triathlon, you put more time and energy into it than someone else did. And by saying yes to those activities, you had to say no to other things. So the problem with living in the middle is everything is getting its undue priority. It goes on to say here, the reason we shouldn't pursue balance is that the magic never happens in the middle. Magic happens at the extremes. The dilemma is that chasing the extremes presents real challenges. We naturally understand that success lies at the outer edges. And this last piece here I thought was really relevant to our conversation, but we don't know how to manage our lives while we're out there. That is our journey together. It's not us saying it's too much pain to be out in the extremes because other areas of our lives are suffering. It's a process of saying, I'm not willing to give up the results that I want to drive by operating in the extremes in each aspect of my life. It's now learning the skill set, the time management, and the prioritization that I can live in the extremes, generate the results that I want, and manage my life across all aspects and each categories. That is the journey we're going on together. So the whole idea here, they're suggesting that we replace the word balance, a work-life balance, with the word counterbalance, which if you think about counterbalance, it's when one side is getting out of balance, you have to make an effort to counterbalance on the other side and balance it back out again. It's not sprinkling a grain of salt to the right and a grain of salt to the left. It's putting big chunks of time and energy into different aspects of your life to counterbalance it out. One thing it says here that I thought was really insightful, it says, when the things that matter most get done, you'll still be left with a sense of things being undone, a sense of imbalance. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I had to come to grips with in my own life is that my to-do list is never done. I will never be in a situation where I drive home at the end of the night, or I leave my home office thinking, oh my gosh, I literally got everything on my to-do list done. I leave that to the people that don't want to achieve at a high level. They don't want to live in the extremes. They can create short to-do lists and they can mark those things off and feel good about themselves. And that's great. But that is not the way I operate. If I want to build several companies, if I want to live life to its fullest in every aspect of my life, if I want to have a bigger impact on people, the things that I must get done, the projects that I must tackle, tend to be a little bit more intensive and extensive than someone else. The idea of my work is never done can be one of those things that creates burnout and exhaustion and demoralization to where you retreat. You have to come to the idea of it's okay that things get undone or don't get done. The point here is, it says leaving some things undone is a necessary trade-off for extraordinary results. But here's the key, is we get to choose what those some things are that don't get done. Part of this process is getting more clarity on what are the things we choose that must get done to operate and create the results in the extreme. And by choosing to do those things, coming to grips that there's some things that we will leave undone that either become unnecessary to the results, or that we need to learn to leverage those things to be done by someone else or something else along the way. The key ingredient is focused time over time. To achieve an extraordinary result, you must choose what matters most and give it all the time it demands. This requires getting extremely out of balance in relation to all other work issues. But it doesn't say stay out of balance there. It's be willing to go out of balance to create the magic in that specific area of your world and stay there long enough to create the magic and the momentum, and then move back to a counterbalancing position. Now, the different areas of your life in your career, for example, if you're launching a new business, or every time when I launch a new business, I know that business, I've got to get out of balance and give it a higher energy and priority than any of my other buckets at that time to create the magic. But once the momentum started, I've got to swing back. On the other side of that, every other aspect of my life still has momentum and is moving, but I'm stealing some of that momentum from those other aspects of my life to give to that new business initiative or that new health initiative or whatever it is. And I've got to be able to monitor how much momentum is being stolen from those other buckets so that I never let them come to a stop. It's okay if they slow for a moment, but I've got to counterbalance and go back. The one that is of highest priority is that of the family time, which tend to be one of the most fragile of the buckets. And there have been times in my life where I've missed the opportunity to come back fast enough, where I've had to go recreate the momentum. It's easier to increase the momentum of a moving object than to start the momentum of a stagnant bucket. So part of this process that we're learning is coming to grips that we're okay living in the extremes. We're okay doing things that other people are not willing to do. That is what makes you who you are, is you're willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do, to create results that other people want, but aren't willing to go through the process to do. The change is we want to figure out, we're going to learn how to do those things without sacrificing other priorities, other important things in our world. Let me share an experience with you that happened to me in 2010. In 2010, I had made one of the biggest business decisions of my life. It's one of those boat burning decisions where you go all in. As you know, the economy was going through a major shift at that time when most people were running away from investing in real estate. I sold everything I absolutely owned, down to my horses, my guns, my motorcycle, anything I could potentially sell, I sold, and moved my family to Arizona, one of the most depressed markets, real estate markets in the country, because I believed in the economic future of Arizona, and I was able to buy properties at a significantly discounted price there. I was fully committed to that adventure and was really excited about it, despite some of the most influential people in my life to that point were calling me on the phone, telling me like, what are you doing? You're absolutely crazy. Don't do this. You're throwing your future away. But I was so convinced in the opportunity that I did it. And luckily, my wife was able to get on board with that opportunity with me. I remember that was one of those times that I had to get completely out of balance, because I knew that failure was not an option. I had gotten into a pattern at that time of, I was up incredibly early. I was working all day. I'd get home in time to have dinner with my wife and kids, put them to bed, and then I'd immediately go back to work. And we were renting a house at that time that wasn't even our house. And I turned the kitchen table into my office at the time, and I would go back to work after the kids went to bed. And I generally would work till the wee hours of the morning, 2, 3, only to get up again a few hours later to do it all over again. And I was enjoying it for the most part, but I got to a point where I was at my rope's end. I felt like I was burning the candle at both ends while someone was dumping gasoline on it. And I remember it was probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning one night, and I sat there overwhelmed. I wasn't even getting any work done. My shoulders were slumped. I was staring at my computer screen, thinking, what? That was really one of the first times that the doubt entered my mind of, what have I done? How have I put myself in this situation? Am I crazy? And it purely was because I got myself so far out of balance that there was no momentum in other areas of my aspect. Health has always been important to me. At that time, I was not working out. I was not spending enough time with my kids because I was so committed to prove it to everybody else that I was going to succeed in that new business adventure. So that night, I created an exercise for myself that I still do anytime that I feel like I'm getting out of balance. And I call it my hats exercise. Basically, what I did at that point, at that time, is it was a much less digital time for me. I operated out of folders and papers, where now I'm live much more digitally. But what I did is I went and got a stack of manila folders, the tabbed manila folders, where you write whatever the tab is at the top to keep things organized. I got a blank stack of manila folders, got everything else off my desk. And the first thing I did is I said, I need to identify what are all the hats that I wear, meaning what are all the different roles that are important to me right now. And on that, I picked up the first folder, and on the tab, I wrote down the first title, Father. So I wrote that, did nothing else with the folder except identify the role. Then I put that one aside. I went to the next one. And I went through this process of writing down every role that I had at the time. Father, husband, I was a scoutmaster at the time, businessman, entrepreneur, son, father. And I just went through and just named everything, every role that I had at that time. The next step that I did is I put them in order of priority at that time, which ones were most important to me at that time. So I reordered those folders in order of which ones were of the most importance to me, which was eye-opening. The second thing I did is that I went back and opened the folder for the first priority, and I asked myself the question, what would be the adjectives or the description that I would want the people I serve in this role to say about my performance, to say about what I'm accomplishing? So for example, the manila folder that said, Father, what are the things that I'd want my kids to describe about me as their father? And I started writing right inside the folder how I'd want them to describe me. And there were some things that I wrote down that I thought, oh my gosh, I think my kids would say that. There were other things I wrote down that I think my kids would want to say about me that I don't think they currently could have said about me in that moment. And that was hurtful, but it was eye-opening. I did that for every role. What is it that I want to accomplish? Who do I want to be in each one of these areas, in each one of these roles? The last piece of the exercise that I did is I went back to the beginning, reopened that first folder, and I wrote down actions. What are the specific actions that must be taken as a high priority that I can become the person I want to be in this role? One of the things that I had identified through doing that is I had to identify those high priority points. What are the most important things? So for example, there's a ton of things that I'm using my role as father at the time, because that still is my number one priority, but I had identified it as my number one priority in that early morning in 2010. And there were a lot of things I could do with my kids, but I couldn't do everything with my kids because I'd have to neglect everything else. So I had to identify what are the most important points that I need to make sure that I'm connecting and creating friction, positive friction. Friction creates energy with my kids, that by doing those specific things, I'm creating the result that I had identified in step 2 of the process. So one of the first things that I'm going to invite you to do as part of the whole Enchilada Network, as part of this tribe, as my partner in going forth to accomplish this together, is I want to invite you to go through the hats exercise. Take a moment in your journaling. Turn off your phone, turn off your screen. Do it old school if you want, do it digitally if you want. I don't really care, but do it. Make a list of what are all the roles or titles that you currently own or want to own. Is that husband, father, friend, son, businessman, leader, athlete, adventurer, whatever it is? Make a list of all of them. Next, put them in order of priority of, at this season of your life, which one is of the most importance? Put them in order of priority. Next, write a short description of how you want to be described in that role. What would that look like to be winning at a high level in that role? Go through that for each of those roles. Lastly, I encourage you to come back and identify what action must be taken for me to create that result. What are the most important points of contact that need to happen? And then in coming episodes, we're going to be talking about how to take that vision and master your calendar and time blocking and accountability to create the results you want. Now, this activity alone is not what's going to create the magic in your world. It's going to give you clarity on the path to creating that magical result of living in the extremes. And again, this is something I'm on that journey with you. This is not something I've perfected, but I'm perfecting. It's something that is a priority to me to become better, because I know, one, I deserve to live a life in the extreme in all these areas, but more importantly, the people I serve in each one of those results, they deserve me at my best. They deserve me at my best. And that is the journey we're going to go on together. So I'm super excited about this opportunity to grow the Whole Enchilada Network. I encourage you to share this out with anybody else that you think may want to join this journey with us. The more like-minded people we can get together in this journey to share our experiences, share our thoughts, is going to give us energy to make this happen. Those people that aren't in alignment with the message, it's okay. We don't need them part of our community, but we'd like to get as many people involved in this journey as we can. And so I thank you for joining us. Looking forward to the next episode. Remember, go make life happen on your terms. Take care.